Hey, friends. So today we are talking about something that has been ongoing on our homestead. And I mean, really, honestly, since we moved in, and that is what to do with all these trees. So we bought the property because it was a foreclosure property. It was 10 acres. And we thought, we can afford this. It's 10 acres. It's close to where we live already. There were a lot of pluses. The major negative was that there were trees everywhere. We bought a house in the woods.
Yeah. And we did at the beginning have a ton of trees taken out because there was like 100-foot pine trees all around the house, which was like terrifying and dangerous. And, everybody that you talk to in the South is like, you don't want pine trees that close. And the first ice storm, you will find out you don't want pine trees that close.
We actually were so grateful because we had a bunch taken out. And our main goal was really just to create a space to garden, to start with.
Yeah.
And then we thought, we'll hit the rest with goats because that's what our goal was when we first moved in, was to have a goat farm.
Right.
And that, we took out a bunch. And I think going back, like we've both agreed, we would have been far more aggressive with that. I think it hurt us to cut trees down. I mean,
it did
almost physically, spiritually, emotionally, like all the things. It was painful to watch trees come down.
It was painful to watch them come down. And thankfully we were naive the first round at the amount of effort it would take to clean it up. And that, because if I would have known, I probably would not have cut down as many, but we just some guy was like, yeah, I'll do it. And I'll just push it all to the side and you'll be fine.
The worst part was he dumped so many of them just into the pond.
Yeah. And he dropped them into the pond and couldn't get them out. And then it was a mess. And then that was a different guy, right? That went across to the backside of our pond, and we have 7 acres back there. And we had that select cut, and with the idea that we would open up the canopy so that we could have, grass to graze. And we knew that the canopy had to be opened, but we didn't realize how much. And again, I think we were shy because we didn't want to take all the trees out.
Well, we also hired the wrong guy. Like the guy didn't know. Right. He wasn't like the kind of guy who was like, what's your goal? He was like, I'll take out the things that are worth my time.
Right.
And so he took out some pretty big trees, some of the older growth trees that he could get to and manage. And then he left a lot behind. And not only that, we didn't have a plan, like going in after him, of how to approach it. And, a year later, it was nothing but undergrowth. Well, that was shading it out again.
Yeah. And I think we thought that he would take it out and then we'd go in there and we'd plant grass seed and grass would be growing. And after he left, we were like, oh, well, this isn't going to work. And kind of realized
we sprinkled some seed back there over the years, but ultimately we stuck goats back and sheep back there and thought, well, maybe they'll get it to where we need it. But it was so much. I mean, I don't know what the ratios are necessarily. That's how they measure. We wanted it 60% open, right?
40% canopy is the max.
And I think we had more like a 80.
Yeah, that's what
even after he cut it down.
And so this time, now we had a new logger. They just finished. And
let's reel it back, because for years we've been like, what are we going to do with those acres back there? We'll put cows back there. We'll put animals back there. But they're, it's like 7 acres that they're done within 3 hours because there's just not a lot of forage back there for them.
Yeah. And ultimately, we've had the same vision of silvopasture, an oak savanna. You read the Mark Shepard books and, everybody's like, this is the way to go. And I totally agree. But what I've very recently learned is that there's 2 kinds of silvopasture development. There's an additive silvopasture and subtractive silvopasture. And those are just
additive is way easier.
Additive is way easier. And that's what I was listening to the Silvopasture podcast, and that's what they were saying is there's not a lot of work to that. And I was like, yeah, I wish that was my problem, but that's not the problem we have. We have the subtractive, which is an insane amount of work and money and time to even get to the point where you can start trying to grow grass.
Right. And so much money. I mean, I think that's the thing. You would think, okay, you have these beautiful trees you could cut down and get lumber from them. It's just not that straightforward. And when you don't have a lot of property to do, you don't have lumber companies really interested. You know, they want to set up one time and take down as much as they can. And 7 acres on a pretty difficult to get to patch is just not ideal. So we struggled. And actually for years, we're kind of looking for somebody to come in and take out more. And then finally Drew stumbled across a guy. Actually, we heard about him from a few people, the Forestry Service being one of those people, because we have reached out to them and said, you know, what would you do? How could you turn this into pasture? And I mean, the truth be told, the Forestry Service is very conventional and they have a lot of ideas that have been passed down from generation to generation, at least decades. And they aren't necessarily up to date on regenerative agriculture or even silvopasturing.
Yeah.
They're like twinkling, like here you say it and they're like, oh yeah, I heard of that. But it's not in practice for sure.
Right. In fact, the forestry agent that was like over our whole area showed up and she had like done Google research the night before to like come out and tell us how to silvopasture.
Right.
Which like, so if you have a small piece of acreage that you want to log, like listen up, because here's some advice. It's like how I feel like, you know, the first thing was like, you need to know your homework and you need to be solid in what your plans are before you start asking for the quote unquote professionals to start coming out. Especially when you have like the land grant universities like NRCS and, you know, all of these places that are funded by big ag and funded by conventional wisdom. They're going to bring that conventional wisdom out to you. And there is like a benefit to having them out, but it's not that their ideas and practices are the end all be all. So you can look outside of their wisdom, make a plan, and then allow them some wiggle room.
Well, I will tell you, they know what you need to do in order to get the money from the government that you might be seeking.
Right.
And the truth is, like, I think it's not worth it to us to do it the way the government would say to do it and then skip all the, it's like one of the major things that was a little bit appalling to me was that spraying chemicals to just kill everything back there is one valid option.
Yeah. Like,
for the Forestry Service.
For the Forestry Service, which is like even more surprising.
Yeah.
But I mean, I will say, like, when they came out, like, she was coming out to tell us, like, we couldn't do it. And, like, it
felt like that. Yeah.
I mean, she pretty much said, like, you can't have cows around trees. And
it'll kill trees. Yeah. That's a common thought, for sure.
So it was like I was like, okay, no, I know about cattle. I'm asking you to come out and help me with forestry.
Right.
And I think once we established that, actually, the turning point was we had a small piece that we had already. I mean, what's that, like a 16th or a 32nd of an acre?
Not much.
That we've already developed into a silvopasture, growing grass underneath trees. And
if you want to know how have we done that? So the first guy that came out that cut trees cut several down in that area. Several have died since we moved in, and Drew has cut down, like, slowly but surely, 2 or 3 of them, you know, over the course of the last 12 years since we've been here.
Right.
And then we've also fed hay there continuously, like, for the last, I don't know, 8 years.
You know, I think the turning point was we planted sun hemp there one year because it was such a small acreage and it was close by the house. We were able to, like,
really keep
we just
an eye on
seeded it really heavy, and that sun hemp. I still remember that kind of the pivotal moment is after that it grew like 8 feet tall, and then we put goats on it and they ate it down to the ground. And then the next year is when we really started getting grasses. So I don't know how that's all related, other than it probably turned the soil into more of a grassland soil from the fungal soil of the forest.
Yeah. It had it shift gears a little.
Maybe, yeah.
Because, you have all the debris from the trees, and it's automatically thinking this is a forest, and it's going to support the growth of more forest.
Yeah.
And so you want to have some kind of an alteration there that throws things off of that trajectory.
Right. And it was so thick that it wouldn't let any, like, undergrowth grow. It was like it shaded out everything else.
Right. Well, and if you've read, the Something of Trees, what is it? The book. Anyway, they're brilliant. Trees do these incredible things, but like a mother tree will feed its own baby tree more through its roots. Yeah. So that system is happening, and we're trying to interrupt it and make something that's a little bit more ecologically diverse and supportive of human life.
Yeah.
And anyway, But so where we are at, we got to the point where found this small lumber guy who would come out and he would cut trees, and he did. He came back, and it took him about 2 weeks, I would say.
And to like, just to encourage you, I called probably 20 different logging companies
over the last 6 years or so.
Yeah. Well, after we had the forestry department out, they gave me a list, and I called the entire list.
Yeah.
And so this takes a lot.
He found his niche in doing.
He said like 30 acres or less is generally what he does. It's just him and another guy. They work Monday through Thursday, what seems like about 9 to 1 p.m., 1 p.m. And they're done. And he said like that's enough for them. That's all they need to live on. And that's what they do. And I mean, really great guys, really professional.
Right.
And that's what I'll say is like first lesson learned is seeing the equipment. So they showed up with this 14-ton
versus
skidder.
The original guy.
Yeah. The original guy showed up with a skid steer on wheels, not tracks, and got stuck back there multiple times.
Oh, he made the biggest ruts and messes. Yeah. I thought our property would never look good again. But
the other thing that I learned after these loggers left, talking with the next step that we'll talk about, which is the land clearing guys, is that a lot of loggers don't care. They'll come rain or shine and just leave massive ruts with these like 14-ton vehicles, which I'd say 2 out of the 4 people that we've had out commented at how little mess there was as far as like ruts and things. So this logger, he was like, he came out like maybe 10 months ago now, and was like, yeah, I'll come out and I'll do the job, but it has to be dry. And he waited until it was dry. But apparently some loggers will just come and just make an complete mess.
Oh, a lot. We've had fencers do it. We've had, land clearers do it. I mean, I would say most of them are willing to get dirty, in a gross way, and sort of wreak havoc on your property no matter what.
And then just kind of leave and be like, leave. Yep, sorry.
That's what happens. Yeah. But anyway, so he's come and he's gone, and that leaves us in this new place of, okay, how in the world? So Drew said, we've talked to these land clearing options. We've talked to forestry mulchers. We've talked to just a guy who would just move it into piles so that we could burn it. But should
we talk numbers?
So much back there. There's so much of this plant material that, if we don't get it cleaned up, the truth is the trees are just going to grow right back through where those logs are laying now, because it's the tops that they can't take to a lumber mill.
Yeah, so I think we should talk about numbers because I think it's important.
Okay.
So we had approximately between 5 and 7 acres cleared, and it was not completely cleared. We wanted Silvopasture, so we went back and we selected, I would say, like 10 to 15 trees to keep. And after that, the guy that was doing the logging selected more trees to leave because they're what are called pulpwood trees. And this is like my first tip to you is he said, halfway through this process that there was no money for pulpwood. So he was leaving those trees, which what that meant was we were making less off of the logging, which, will come around in a second here for the cleaning. And, but also that he was leaving more trees than we had anticipated, which made the cleanup more difficult. So in retrospect, I'm not sure if I would have or not.
Maybe have them chop and drop.
I might have waited. They're not going to cut trees unless they're taking them out. But I might have waited until the pulpwood was up. I don't know. We probably still would have done it. Would you have waited?
I guess, I don't know. I would like to see the numbers. What's the difference between the pulpwood? Where can it go? And what is it now? And what are the chances of it going up?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. We might have made like another $500 off of it.
Well, and it's not even the money so much as the getting them out of there.
Right.
I mean, I was take it all, keep all the money, just take it all and keep it all. That's what my theory was.
Yeah.
So that they would be gone.
So there's also loggers that will come and bring chippers out, and they take what's called a slash. So the slash is like the top part of the tree where the tree branches out. The loggers just cut that, and they take what's from the bottom down, and they take that to the...
But they can cut a straight board out.
Well, yeah. But what that means is these loggers in particular, and a lot of loggers do it, they leave it. Especially from what my understanding now is the smaller ones have to because they don't have the equipment.
Well, I don't think you could probably get the equipment you need back there.
Right. The one guy told me that they would need to be able to get an 18-wheeler back there and turn it around. Yeah. And it's like, there's no way.
Not only is it, we don't have a road back to it. So they kind of made one.
They could make one, but
also you get back there and it's very steep. It's not, I guess they do it on mountainside, so they potentially could do it, but it was just, yeah.
So the first check that we got was or cash, actually. You got to pay cash, so that was kind of cool. But was for $500. And it was like, I think it was 2 weeks worth of wood. So they were getting $10 a ton for this wood that was kind of lower grade.
I think you took tulip poplar out first?
It took tulip poplar, yeah. So it's also like an interesting thing. They take it out by species, which it
makes sense. When you take it to the mill, you're going to want it to be all one thing, probably.
Right. And then they took out, after that, they started taking out the like prime wood, which was the white oak and red oak. And the hickory was after that. But then they got $50 a ton for that. And so we ended up with $1,500 for that. And then they took out,
which means they got $3,000 because he was splitting it 50-50.
They were splitting it 50-50.
So
yeah. And the other thing was when I first talked to him, I had told him he could keep all the money if he would just clear the logs, which I'm so thankful that he said no to that.
Why?
Because I just wanted it cleared out there. And I was like, we didn't have another company. So I was like, just come and take the logs and, open up the canopy so we can grow grass.
Oh, if he'd taken what is still on the ground out there, I'd say you'd definitely keep it. Is that not what you meant?
No, I mean, like, what he did, but, like, kept all the money. Because we couldn't find anybody to do it.
Oh, yeah, we were just grateful, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't really realize how bad of a mess it was going to be. But so then the last load was pines and hickories, and that was probably a week's worth of loads, and that was another $500. No, $1,500. We ended up with $4,000 total from the logging. So then the next step was we went back there and we were like, oh my gosh, it looks worse than a tornado and a hurricane coming through together.
It's terrible.
It's insane.
The cool thing is you can see light. So like there's this really beautiful opportunity that you can sense being back there. You can feel this opportunity. And I mean, to be fair, like there were some really beautiful big trees. We kept a lot of those. So you can imagine if it was just grass growing underneath those. It would
be so beautiful.
It'd be heavenly.
I can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
I know it's there.
But it's so difficult because to get from where we're at right now, which is all of these branches, giant branches on the ground. And the other travesty is that it's like really, really good firewood potentially, but the hours and the labor and the time
and the danger.
It's so dangerous back there because all these logs are just in willy-nilly piles. And
they've been pushed by this 14-ton vehicle out of the way.
Or dropped on top of each other.
So some of the branches can be like under an immense amount of pressure that's like you cut the wrong branch and it's trebucheting back into your face.
Oh. Death trap. So that's what it really feels like a bit. A death trap.
It does. So the first guy we had came out and he looked around and he was like, there's all these pulpwood trees, so it's like this thing that I'm going to have to navigate through to clear it. It'll be $80,000. And my mouth just dropped.
Look, let's remind ourselves, what do we want to do? The full potential of that property, 7 acres, potentially full potential, 3 cows per acre, 21 cows, spending $80,000 to have a property that might eventually support 21 cows. Yeah. It's just, it's insane. I think it goes back to the idea of, we didn't know what we didn't know. So we bought this property and we thought, you cut trees down. That's not that big of a deal. You can do this, you can do that. It's you just don't know how much these things cost. And I mean, maybe now they're ridiculous, like everything is,
I keep going back to what would the pioneers have done? And I think
one tree at a time.
I think girdling the trees.
I don't know. Thinking about that, I think about Pa, and when they left the little house in the big woods, I think they left because it was woods and he wanted prairie.
Maybe.
I think the value of cleared land is
and stuff. He wasn't running cattle.
No, I know, but I'm just saying the value of cleared land. He couldn't have planted wheat in the forest. I think it feels like endless potential to have cleared land.
Oh, for sure.
Right. And so that's like.
Well, I look at some people that are like buying like a soybean field or something, and I'm like,
well, yeah, that's maybe the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's good to me, the other end, because you could plant trees and you could plant some faster growing trees, but like
the healing of that soil,
you're still like a ways away. And and then you have the like soil and I don't know. I mean,
there's fertility back there.
I definitely think it would be easier on a soybean field.
Yeah.
But that's not what we have. So,
it's not, but I think it's important to consider that if you haven't purchased a property yet, what are you getting and how is it going to serve the needs that you have? Because maybe truthfully, you just want to grow mushrooms and you could grow all the mushrooms you want back there.
Yeah, you could.
Which we talked about, but
we want
livestock.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So then we had another guy come out and he quoted like 40,000, and then we had a guy come out that was like a forestry mulcher and he quoted 6,000. So if you're keeping up, we have a deficit of at least 2,000, if not more.
Oh, and that's a forestry mulcher cannot. These logs are giant. I mean, there are some of them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see me. Like 12 inches in diameter.
I'd say there's some that are 24.
Yeah, at least. Yeah. And so, a forestry mulcher can get through maybe 10 inches.
They can do it. It's just they're going to be there like
forever.
Yeah. So we have a good friend that's a forestry mulcher, and he's going to like grind up as high as he can. And then we're going to just keep some logs back there. Thankfully, it's for cattle, so it doesn't need to look like a park. And hopefully, I think he's still on the schedule to come out tomorrow and get started. And we're just going to spend the money that we made off of logging doing it. And then we're going to pause. And
well, first we're going to see what happens in 4 hours of doing that. Because if it's just not really getting anywhere, then we need to be, wise about that.
Then I don't know what we're doing.
Then we're going to call in all the beavers. Yeah. And anyone who has a chainsaw.
Lane said just light it on fire where it's at.
Lane the fireman. Yeah. I feel wow. Yeah. I mean, it feels like maybe after a big rain.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, it's a mess. It's so hard to wrap your brain around. And I think you just feel kind of defeated. I mean, I know I feel defeated. Like, how many lessons are we going to learn? How many times are we going to come up to these walls, these barriers and be like, yeah, never mind. We're just going to let it sit for another 7 years. I mean, that's pretty much what's happened.
I will say the other massive mistake, I'm not sure if it's really a mistake, is I had given up on the idea of having it logged. So I fenced the perimeter.
Yes, but the win there, and if you've listened to our fencing episode, you'll know, is that it wasn't like a hardwire fence.
It's high tensile.
It's a high tensile.
It's not woven wire.
It's not woven wire. It's not, it's going to be movable.
It's all T-post or trees. So essentially what we'll do is just after this mess is cleaned up, I'm just going to go in there and fix whatever's broken.
Yeah.
And it won't be a huge deal. Like the wire, the hardest part of high tensile is pulling the wire.
Well, a few T-posts might be busted, but other than that, material is still there.
Right.
And so, if you did that to a regular fence, like it would not.
Oh, a woven wire fence. Yeah, that would be, that'd be horrible.
In fact, the guy we have, this other little section that is in a hardwire fence up near the road. And he was like, yeah, I think I better not do anything in there for the sake of the fence.
Right. So, I mean, if you're taking notes, I would say like my takeaways so far on this, and we'll update you in the next part, but is, find a legit logging company, which seems like it kind of goes without saying.
I mean, at this point, you think about that, like I haven't pieced this together yet. I'm having this revelation. But $80,000, we could buy, 8 more cleared acres somewhere close by. It would be smarter.
Or we could buy a really nice of a piece of equipment to start forestry mulching that back there. Like that's what I laughed about to myself. I mean, $80,000, like buy your own excavator. I mean, maybe it's going to be $100,000 for a really big excavator, but I mean, when you're at 80,000, what's 20,000 more?
we're not doing that. But
I just couldn't believe the guy looked at me with a straight face.
Well, and to be fair, it's his work is in like subdivisions, not in pasture clearing.
Yeah. I mean, and the reality is, even the guy that said 40,000, he said he felt really bad saying that number, but
knowing what our goals were,
but he's like, that's really what it would take. So
yeah,
I mean, I would say like, I think to do it again, I would want to know what the cost of cleanup was going to be before I started.
I don't know if they could have projected that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that. I don't know. Maybe the lumber guy could have.
Yeah. Some people say like a forestry consultant, you should think about hiring. I've seen some people say that their forestry consultants were like absolute trash and not worth having. And then some said they were good.
Where do you find one?
The forestry department has a list of forestry consultants.
Interesting. And it's not the people from the Forestry Service that came out and walked the property with us.
No, it's like a professional who I think they take a cut from, it's like 5% or something like that from whatever you make. But they're
more into like making money from cutting the property.
Yeah, they like negotiate the best price. I think they even work with the mills. So like, they're making sure that you're getting the most money because it's advantageous to them. But the ones that I could find were not interested in our small acreage either. So it was kind of like, they're doing like hundreds of acres at a time. So I don't know. That that's
the wall that we bump up against constantly in this lifestyle is, you have this homestead and it's 5-10 acres maybe total. And you're trying to then go to the extensions agent and they're like, yeah, sorry, unless you have 100 acres.
They're like, you're not a real farmer.
I mean, there's so many like regenerative things out there that I've written about, like to people about, and they're like, oh, you have to have 80 acres or more. And it's just so frustrating because it's like, how much more power would we have if everybody who had 5 acres could use these services? I mean,
right. And I mean, I will say like, so our NRCS agent, we had a rough start with him, but I feel like we're kind of starting to get somewhere with him. And I called him the other day and was like, hey, we finished getting it logged because he was kind of like, that's the next step. And he was like, okay, that's awesome. We'll talk in January. And I was like, do you know when in January? He's like, no, I'll call you. And I was like, okay. So there's like potentially funding from that we can get maybe. But,
it seems like the potential for that is more for like an 80-20% on seeds.
Yeah. And in my experiences, it's generally, so far, it has not been worth waiting for the government on that. I will say there's also soil and water, which is different than NRCS, that we maybe should talk to them and see how they could help us also.
Yeah.
But, that's where we're at. Which is we have a few trees standing, a whole lot of mess on the ground, and we're waiting to see how much a forestry mulcher can do.
If you would like some firewood and you're willing to cut it yourself, come and talk to us.
I will say, so far, all the firewood people have been like, nope, don't want it.
I mean, there's like thousands and thousands of dollars worth of
oh my gosh,
firewood back there.
If you had the right tool, it would be a great deal for someone. I'd give it away for free.
Yeah, no, it's yours. Your name is all over it. Anyway.
So yeah, if you know somebody that's getting ready to log their property or need some help with the idea of logging,
or buying a property and they, don't know that they shouldn't buy a forest.
Right. Yeah. Share this podcast with them. If you're in the midst of this and you're in the same kind of scenario and you want to commiserate, send us a message, DM, email, text.
Yeah.
But
you're not alone.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
Right.
Not everyone inherited a beautiful set of like decades worth of free farmed land to make their homestead on. And so we're trying to, carve it out of the wilderness.
And essentially, like, I like to think we're doing it for you because now we've learned that hard lesson.
This is all for you.
When we come out and do a consult for you, we can tell you like, hey, don't do this, or this is how you can do this. And we have more knowledge.
Or let's think about an alternative to spending that kind of dough on clearing this land. Anyway.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.